Excellency, the Honorable Darwin Henfield, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and Chairman of the General Assembly. Excellency, Ambassador Audrey Marks, Permanent Representative of Jamaica to the OAS and Chairperson of the Permanent Council. Excellency, Mr. Luis Almagro, Secretary General. Excellency, Mr. Nestor Mendez, Assistant Secretary General. Honorable Ministers of Foreign Affairs, heads of delegations, delegates, permanent observers, other representatives, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my singular pleasure to bring greetings from Bridgetown, Barbados, on behalf of the government and people of Barbados. Today, catastrophic circumstances have forced us to eschew traditional in-person meetings and instead adopt virtual meetings to conduct our business. This is, in my estimation, evidence of the unprecedented and uncertain times that confront us as a hemisphere. However, not all is lost. Our virtual gathering signals our intent to stand together to face the scourge of this pandemic and must be seen as a step in the right direction. It is also testimony of the need for collective action to tackle common threats, confirming also that multilateralism remains the most effective system to address global threats. Whilst I am honored to be with you today to continue in earnest the critical work of this august body, these are deeply troubling times, particularly for small island development states. Mr. President, the theme chosen for this 50th regular session, Facing the Challenges of COVID-19 in the Hemisphere, a collaborative approach to addressing vulnerabilities and building resilience in times of crisis based on the 4 pillars of the OAS, is indeed very apt, given the critical juncture at which the OAS and the world finds itself. The challenges of COVID-19 are present, and like dark clouds looming on the horizon, represent an ominous foreboding for all states. Sir, the situation remains grave for many developing low and middle income countries. Not many viable options are available to us. For those of us in the Caribbean community faced with domestic contractions, falling exports, and severe difficulties due to flagging tourism receipts, the future is dire. Against this backdrop, many of our states remain in the grip of a very active Atlantic hurricane season. As small developing states, we are very concerned that this crisis may be existential at worst, reversing much of our hard-won gains. This pandemic has blatantly exposed our inherent vulnerabilities, which are being exacerbated and undermined by this global health crisis. Yet, in many ways, as small states, we have proven resilient. For the most part, our centralized governments have produced nimble, rapid response efforts, which have recorded significant public compliance through structured preventative measures. But despite our most valiant efforts, the crisis has and continues to strain our limited health infrastructure and to disrupt valuable supply chains. With travel and tourism at a standstill, many small states, particularly small island development states, are facing acute economic crises and increased unsustainable debt. Only with the support of our multilateral partners can we expand our limited fiscal space to secure more robust preparation for the reopening of our economies and to drive a green and smarter recovery. The pandemic has brought into sharp focus and intensified inequalities among our countries. The hemispheric response to the global pandemic must embrace international development cooperation as a means to strengthen resilience and to ensure that no state, particularly small vulnerable ones, is left behind. Many states, like those in the Caribbean community, face high external debt burdens, which will require complementary external debt suspension or relief programs. Our small states are also particularly vulnerable because of our geographic positioning and our strong dependence on trade. Concomitantly, our limited access to development finance and the disproportionate impact of natural disasters and climate change to our economies further exacerbates our development challenges. As the principal political forum for dialogue between the countries of the Americas, the OAS can play a pivotal role. Through this forum, member states collectively pursue policies for the protection and promotion of democracy, human rights, multidimensional security, and integral development in the hemisphere. As the oldest multilateral body in the Western Hemisphere, the OAS remains the premier organ for political dialogue and in seeking to build resilience for its member states, particularly the more vulnerable. The OAS must therefore of necessity be at the forefront of international policies and rules that are more responsive to small states' needs. When we speak of building resilience, this hemispheric body must also commit to assisting small states access to critical financing. The OAS, based on its 4 pillars, must bring together member states to discuss ideas, build consensus on policy positions, and advocate on behalf of its constituents. Without this valuable support, many small states will be unable to fulfill the basic ideals and principles which this body holds dear. Without critical support, many small and vulnerable states will be unable to respect, protect, and fulfill their human rights obligations. There will also be difficulties in addressing challenges that arise from our interconnectedness and global phenomena such as climate change, global displacement, and COVID-19 will continue to wreak havoc. We recognize that COVID-19 has diverted attention and resources away from other pressing challenges such as security issues, the war on drugs, hunger, and gender inequality. Moreover, climate change still represents the greatest threat to humanity. To this end, Barbados has sponsored a resolution on climate change. The resolution, entitled Advancing the Hemispheric Response to Climate Change in the Context of the COVID-19 Pandemic, calls on all member states to take robust and integrated action to prevent and address the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, drive growth, build resilience, and accelerate the transition to low carbon economies. It also requests the General Secretariat to use its good offices to advocate for new and accelerated financing solutions to advance the hemispheric response to the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. As a SIDS, we recognize that we face an uneven burden in seeking to mitigate climate change, whilst at the same time working to secure increased development financing. As I have noted in Barbados' address to the 75th session of the General Debate at the United Nations General Assembly, the greatest contributors to the climate crisis do not bear the consequences proportionately. Some countries provide suggestions on how small island development states should seek to mitigate climate change, whilst at the same time adopting measures that severely undermine our efforts. The impact of the pandemic has been felt across the hemisphere, and as member states deal with their own economic contractions, this organization's finances have also suffered as a result. In the year ahead, operating with a reduced budget ceiling, the OAS must prioritize efficiency and preserve critical mandates and ensure that our meetings have productive value for the people of the Americas. Even in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, we cannot lose sight of the existential threat of climate change. Chair, it is deeply troubling that as of now, all current projections show that the Americas will miss its mitigation targets to lower global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by 2030. Worse still, the resources that have been diverted towards this pandemic have significantly narrowed our fiscal space to meet our adaptation needs for the climate change. On this score, Barbados is heartened to be joined by 20 member states in the sponsorship of this resolution, which galvanizes our collective advocacy to international financial institutions, permanent observer partners, and external donors to support the momentum of climate ambition in this hemisphere. The Inter-American system has been buoyed by successfully contributing to the maintenance of peace and security in the hemisphere. This has been particularly evident through its electoral monitoring processes and fighting discrimination in all its forms, especially against women, the disabled, the marginalized, and indigenous populations, and, as its motto declares, in striving to attain more rights for more people. It is for this reason that the development pillar of the OAS not only remains critical to the organization's progress, but becomes even more relevant to the continued socioeconomic development of member states, particularly small developing states, that at any period in the organization's history. The Executive Secretariat for Integral Development, SEDI, of the OAS has sought to refocus its work plan, developing initiatives to assist member states to address the challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. For these actions, they need to be commended for being timely in their response. These initiatives, undertaken by SEDI, are aimed at enhancing the competitiveness and greater digitization of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Support for these sectors, hard hit by the global pandemic, is fully endorsed by Barbados. We also welcome the work being done to assist young scientists and entrepreneurs to adapt technology to develop innovative products and services. Initiatives like these are especially important at a time our economies are pressed to diversify. Additionally, viable alternatives, avenues of employment should be made available to our youth, particularly when traditional means of employment are closing. Barbados fully supports the adoption of this year's resolution on advancing hemispheric initiatives on integral development, particularly the impassioned call for member states to discuss access to international financing. Furthermore, the strengthening of international cooperation mechanisms, given the specific challenges of small island and low-lying development states, as well as low and middle-income countries, to consider additional criteria to assess poverty and development of countries to include vulnerability, in addition to income status indicators, is indeed welcome. These discussions are critical to ensure meaningful strides are made towards attaining sustainable and climate-resilient development for all our countries. The government of Barbados fully appreciates and embraces the principles of multilateralism. We believe that multilateralism remains even more critical at this stage. Our shared common interests and challenges underscore the belief that when we work together to create inclusive, secure, peaceful societies with equal opportunities for all, we are stronger in our unity. The coronavirus, which is too small to be seen with the naked eye, is no respecter of wealth or geographical size. Yet it has proven that it is only when we work together that we stand a chance to defeat this small but formidable foe. Barbados therefore remains committed to the continued exploration of increased access to concessional financing and greater cooperation on advancing dialogue on the equitable access to vaccines against COVID-19, affordable quality testing and surveillance testing to manage the community transmission impacting so many countries at this time. It is imperative, therefore, that we do not waver from our adherence to these principles and that we hold fast to the provisions of the founding documents of our organization, even when or especially when we are faced with crises, as we inevitably will. At these difficult moments, it is incumbent on us to rely on dialogue, active, inclusive dialogue that seeks to create and ensure an environment and conditions for growth and progress to thrive for the good of the majority. Mr. President, even as we continue to promote dialogue, member states must also remain committed and unwavering in strengthening wherever possible the resources, human and financial, of the Secretariat so that it can implement the mandates prioritized and approved by member states. Mandates which are designed to operate in the best interests of member states and which can only be achieved with the support of an efficient and effective Secretariat. One thing remains clear: the world as we know it is forever change, and this change continues to manifest itself in ways hitherto unheard of and never before envisaged. A global novel virus has kept us sheltering in place, contained in our homes. Businesses have been forced to reorient the way they conduct their operations. To do otherwise is to create your own demise. Government's relationship with whom it serves has also been altered significantly. At the individual level, our interactions with the outside world and even to each other may never be the same again. Faced with a common external threat, as states we are forced to look past our differences. COVID-19, while a formidable foe, presents us with a singularity of purpose that should help us reset and regroup, recalibrate if we must. In recalibrating, our OAS too must be effective and efficient, developing a resilience that serves the needs of its member states. To do otherwise is to secure its demise, rendering it obsolete. I thank you, Mr. President.